After being released in 1995 to some moderate success in Japan, another issue of D was released in very limited supplies, exclusively for the 3DO, which was the console that D was native to. The limited edition run of D was originally called D no Shokutaku Diner Director's Cut, or as it's called in English, D's Diners Director's Cut. This version came with some bonuses not seen in the original game, as well as a mini-disc that contained some of the game's soundtrack. However, the most interesting thing about this version of D is what would happen after you collected the 4 hidden bugs scattered throughout the game. If one were to manage to complete this task, they'd be greeted with a sneak preview of Warp's next game, D2. However, the D2 we received in 1999 was much different than the one seen here. For one, the game seemingly takes place in Transylvania, rather than the wastes of northern Canada. There, in a somewhat run-down castle, we are introduced to Vlad the Impaler, or Dracula, who's in a bit of a pickle, considering that he hasn't had a son and his wife just died. And if you're a noble, you know that's a bad thing. So just like any normal insane tyrant, he summons Satan and makes a deal with him, offering his soul for a son to take his legacy. As usual, the devil agrees to his barter. In an extended trailer released sometime later, the story cuts to 1998, a year after the first game takes place, where we are briefly reunited with Laura, who is now pregnant. However, the plane she is riding on gets invaded by Satan, you don't hear that sentence every day, who proceeds to snatch Laura's unborn baby before the plane crashes, presumably killing Laura. Before the trailer ends, though, we hear a baby's cry as we look onto Dracula's castle. After this, besides a few magazine clippings and a few short clips seen in the staff reel of Enemy Zero, not much was heard about D2 until the 1999 release of the D2 on the Dreamcast that we know today. The only few things that people didn't know for certain was that D2 was going to be released, at least originally, on the 3DO successor, the Panasonic M2. For those of you who don't know, the Panasonic M2 was an unreleased console that was made to compete directly with the Sony PlayStation. The console itself was reportedly to be more powerful than the N64, and possibly on par with the Sega Dreamcast. Sadly, the console never saw the light of day since the Matsushita Corporation, the company that bought out the 3DO Corporation, decided to scrap the project. However, certain arcade games were released in the late 90s that actually incorporated the M2's hardware. One of the most interesting games that uses this architecture is Konami's Evil Knight, a 3-player light gun game that looked graphically like a halfway point between House of the Dead 1 and House of the Dead 2. Konami also published a fighting game called Battle Trist that also used this hardware, and in all honesty doesn't look too bad either, at least graphically. Sadly, D2 on the M2 never made its way onto any sort of platform or arcade, and was largely forgotten until D2 on the Dreamcast came out. However, if one were to have played the D2 Shock demo, then they would have a VMU file that would unlock a preview for D2 on the M2, which is a pretty interesting Easter egg. Also, as Derek pointed out in his D2 review, you can see some gameplay footage of the original D2 playing as the in-flight movie in the intro of D2. Besides these early game trailers and magazine sneak peeks, there were a few videos by Timo Weyrich, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly, which show very early builds of D2's actual gameplay. As we can see here, the game was going to be split into FMV cutscenes and real-time gameplay moments, or at least it seems that way. This version of D2 is so bare bones that there's only really a few rooms to see a sort of day and night system and the skeleton of a combat engine. So really, there's not a lot to be made out here with just these few things. All one can really do is speculate about what could have been, and judging by the fact that the game is literally the most vaporware thing in existence, being an unreleased game on an unreleased console, I don't think we'll be seeing anything new for this version of D2, at least anytime soon. Even though D2 on the M2 is an interesting piece of gaming history, and it is fun to speculate about all the possibilities that could have been in store for us, I still think we ended up with a better product. D2 on the Dreamcast is one of the most interesting and creative games to come out in the past 20 years. It's by no means perfect, but it's a testament to Warp's unconventional game making and Kenji Eno's bold individualism as a game developer. Besides people like Hideo Kojima and Suda51, we rarely see people make the games they want to make, even if that alienates the vast majority of the gamer audience. But the ones that do forge their own path are usually the ones that are remembered the fondest. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the year 2018. So, see you guys there.